This line design artwork is a great way to practice your shading and blending of color. It is awesome because it is all about line and color, which are two very important elements of art. Also, it's all about unity, movement, and rhythm. Principles of design that are really important to growing your skills as an artist. This is a beginner to intermediate tutorial, and you can level up by using different materials. You can even simply do this with just a pencil, and I'm going to walk you through how to create a line design that looks like ribbons that are 3D. If you love learning about art, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an art tutorial. Start by drawing one curved line from the top of your paper down to the bottom. Don't make it too complicated. Then you will add a second line to make it look 3D like a ribbon, and I'm going to cross one time for now. Crossing over, you're going to finish your line all the way down to the bottom. That's going to make it look 3D. Do the same thing with your second line, this time crossing over in one direction. So I did from the right side of my paper to the left. I sketched out my line and then erased it because I thought it looked kind of weird when it crossed over. I'm going to make this one a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to have my ribbon twisting in several sections. So you cross over your first line with the second, and it kind of disappears behind the first line and then goes around. It looks a little bit weird before you add color. So my last and final line, I'm doing a lot of loopies, which is a little stressful because you have to figure out like where's the ribbon in front and where is it behind. A good strategy is if you have a ribbon, twist it up and look at it and see how the shapes interact. So with this one, it's very complicated because I'm making these loops. So I'm crossing the first line in front, disappearing behind, and then I'm going back in front of that first line. So it's a lot of problem solving. It's a lot of thinking about where would this line end up. And when in doubt, don't do so many loops right away. You only need a couple to make it look really interesting. So don't be afraid of your eraser. Think of it as problem solving, and if it looks weird, touch it up and try again. Today, I am using Crayola colored pencils, and I'm keeping my color scheme really simple. I've seen this done before with watercolor, oil pastel, pen. You can do this with just your pencil. But I'm going to be using my red, and I'm going to be pressing down as hard as I can to create my darkest value. Now, you've heard me say this every video I've ever made about shading and using colored pencils. Do a value scale first. If you don't know what that is, click the link above and I'll walk you through. So I'm doing this section of ribbon first because it has a lot of overlap, and I want my darkest values, which are the light or the darkest areas of color, to be where the ribbon overlaps. So where the ribbon is behind itself or another ribbon is where I want it to be the darkest. So I'm pressing down as hard as I can with my red, and then as it twists or gets larger or comes in front, I'm going to make that part lighter. If that sounds confusing at first, don't worry. This artwork is all about repetition. I'm going to be repeating these steps over and over again, so pick a section that you feel comfortable with. I'm picking a complicated one just because I love all the overlap and I am excited by doing these shaded areas. So you can see where I'm crossing over is much lighter than the back part of the ribbon. Make sure to leave a nice little white area for a highlight, and you see where the ribbon twists. You want a dark area on both sides because the shadow would be on both sides because of the twist. Okay, to make a really nice shadow, I'm using my dark blue. I could use black, but I really like how the dark blue creates almost a violet or purple color scheme in my ribbon. So the ribbon is going to stay red, but I'm using my color to give it a really vibrant shadow. When in doubt, always mix and blend color. You could just use red and just rely on the dark and light areas, but I just feel like using different colors and overlapping and blending really gives it a nice shadow. On that note, I'm also going to use my white to kind of blend my reds to each other. So it's not scratchy, but it has a really smooth blend of my lightest, medium, and then darkest values. So you can see that it already looks 3D. You can already see where the ribbon in front is lighter and where the ribbons overlap or are behind have darker values. So I'm going to continue this step with this loop, and this is going to be a really nice dark area. So I'm pressing down as hard as I can with my red, and I'll go back to my blue once I kind of map it out. I like to do just sections of ribbon at a time. So each little section, I'll kind of shade and map out my values like you see me doing now. And then I'll go back and do the shadows and the white blending before I move on to the next section. You can work in any way that makes sense for you, but I get overwhelmed when I do like one whole ribbon at a time. I like to break it down into sections. Following the same rules as before, you can see I am going lighter on top to give it the effect that it's 3D and crossing over. So even before I add the blue, it definitely has that nice 3D effect. This is a great section because you can really see how I kept it darker on the ends and lighter towards the middle. That gives it that nice 3D effect. This area would be super dark because it's crossed over twice, so you would kind of have a nice shadow in the whole section. I just love that violet. So I'm going to go back to all the areas that I shaded darkest, that darkest red, and overlap with a nice dark layer of that blue to create my violet shadows. This is just an extra step that really elevates. When you're using colored pencils, blend, get creative with your color schemes, and I'm going to show you a really cool color trick in the next ribbon. So this section is looking just like a present that has been unwrapped, and I'm really loving the movement that I'm creating with this ribbon. You could certainly do more than one or more than 3 ribbons. I just felt like that was a good number to start with. I've seen art teachers do this before where they do like 12 ribbons, but for me, 3 was a good place to start. And I just am going to be focusing on that shading and blending, which is the skill that this artwork really focuses on. I like how this is almost looking like the letter G in cursive, and I'm imagining doing this again where I use cursive to spell out words that I then go in and shade. I think that'd be really awesome. No offense to my students now, but they don't know cursive. They don't teach cursive anymore, or at least they don't teach it like they used to when I was in school. So this would be a really hard lesson for my current students because I'd have to teach them cursive first. But if you're old school like me and you learned it in school, that would be a really great, fun way to practice shading and blending and take your lettering to the next level. I think it's really important to map out your values first with your colored pencil, just keeping it simple with your base color, which for me is red. Then going back in and deciding which areas you want to make more vibrant by overlapping other colors, or even going back to your base color and making some areas darker. Make sure to leave that nice gap of white in the middle. That's going to really push that value, that lightest light area, and really make it look 3D. So you can see I've mapped out my values, and I always try to use 3. Dark, medium, and light. White for the highlight, and then going back in with the blue for the shadow creates such a gorgeous range of value. Again, I'm going to say it, practice, practice, practice. So if this looks overwhelming, don't start with your ribbon. Do a practice one in your sketchbook, do a value scale first, and then just do one for practice before you jump right into a whole piece of paper or work of art that uses this much shading. This is such a great way to learn how to shade because it doesn't have to represent anything in particular. It certainly looks like a ribbon, but a ribbon can change its shape depending on what material it's made out of, and you can twist it any shape that you would like. All right, so I'm jumping in, as you can see, on my second ribbon, and I want to keep my color scheme very harmonious and monochromatic. So I'm using my red orange. It's still very red. It looks pretty similar to the one I used before, but it has a little bit of an oranginess to it that I think is really lovely. So you can see I'm starting on my twist here, and although it's so similar to the first color, it does stand out from the first loop that I did. Now I'm excited for this one because you can see I'm mapping out my basic values, darkest on the ends, getting lighter towards the center, but this time instead of using blue to enhance my shadows, I'm going to use green. And I know that seems weird, like why would you use green? Red and green are complementary colors. So although I used my blue and the red, and this is more of a red-orange, look at how that green creates this like really nice dark color that's just a neutral kind of black color without it using black. You certainly could use black if you wanted, but I really love how the green complements that red-orange and really creates a nice neutral dark shadow color. So be creative with your color combinations. You can always practice them before you use them. But green and red mixed together makes such a gorgeous, nice, dark shadow. And it's slightly different from the purple. So although there's a lot of harmony in my work of art, I want each ribbon to have a little bit of its own personality or stand out in its own way. To get that really nice color payout, you can see I'm going crazy, pressing down as hard as I can to get that vibrant, look at that nice vibrant color. So even though I map out my values first, just like I'm doing here, I always go back and really pay attention to how dark and vibrant I want my color scheme to be. I think colored pencils look nice when you shade softly, but I prefer a lot of overlap, a lot of blending and burnishing, whereas that's where you press down as hard as you can with your colored pencil to completely cover your paper. There's a lot of different styles of using colored pencils, but I'm always one to prefer to just really press down with your hand. Yes, it might hurt a little bit, but that's why they call it artwork. So if you're wondering, am I actually drawing this fast? The answer is no. Like in many of my videos, once you see me do the first few steps, I speed things up. So I'm actually, in this video, it's sped up twice the speed of what I did in real life. I go slower at first, of course, but this is all about repetition. So you can see with each section of ribbon that I'm doing, I'm mapping out my value, paying attention to where I want it to have a highlight and where I want it to look like it has a darkness or a shadow, then going back in with my shadow color and my white, and then going back with my base color if I want it to be a little more vibrant or darker with that base color. So the second ribbon, it's the same steps, and your ribbon will look different from mine because you drew it your own way. So even if you kept your ribbon really simple, pay attention to where you want those light and dark areas so it really has that vibrant three-dimensional effect. For my final ribbon, I decided to go dark, and I'm going to be using black as my base color. Remember at the beginning of the video, I said this would be monochromatic. Mono means one, chroma means color, so it's a color scheme based on one color. And so although I am shading black, I'm gonna go back in and add some red so that you have hints of red throughout, almost like it's a burgundy or dark red ribbon. This was a really fun section because it's really dark in the middle and then it fades out, a perfect value scale. And so I'm going to, just like I did with my red section, use black as my local color or base color, mapping in the darkest and lightest areas. I'm going pretty light here because this is a major curve in the ribbon. It's a fatter part, it's jutting out, and I want that white highlight to really stand out. I love using white for blending because it just connects and smooths and just gives a really nice transition between my values, especially with this gray color. So this kind of blends everything together and makes it nice and smooth, like a ribbon you might have on a present. It is December, right? So I have Christmas on my brain. My birthday's in December too, so maybe it's birthday present. And you can see I'm going back in lightly with my red to give my artwork harmony and unity. And although black is my base color, I want that flash of red in there so everything connects. It gives it a really nice burgundy effect. So I will be repeating these steps, and this is one of my more simple ribbons of the three. So there's not that many curves to go with, so I'm going to kind of add a little bit of darkness in an area that's thinner, and then make it lighter where it's fatter to give it that nice depth that I'm going for. like this bottom left corner was a little bit boring, a little bit neglected. So I'm going to go back and add one final twist of ribbon. This will give my corner just a nice edge to it, and I feel like it will just complete the work of art. You can add as many ribbons as you would like. Again, you could spell out words, you can use different color schemes. I know I kept mine really simple. This would be really fun and I think easy to do with watercolor paint. A little more challenging with acrylic, but what a great way to learn shades and tints. I'm really happy with what I created, and I'm going back as a final step and using my eraser to touch up any smudge lines and any pencil marks I don't want to be there. I probably should have done this earlier, but it's a good last step. So cleaning up your design is always a great way to really look at things and ask yourself, am I finished? I love this work of art because it has all the elements there. You're focusing on line, on color, on value, and don't forget about movement and rhythm, two principles of design that are really important to a work of art. This has so many opportunities to show off your creativity, and it just looks super cool. Thanks so much for sticking around and making art with me. And if you're interested in more drawing tutorials, I've got you covered. Check these out.